hosts.
We all can be
Mortals. Welcome back, mere Mortalites 2. Once again, an edition of Musings here. You've got Juan on this side.
Karen here on this side.
And we are on the 12th of June. Oh, June, Jesus almighty.
Jeez.
January. I would have been very quick. God, I don't even know how that popped up. And it is 2025, 12th of January 2025. And we are live at 9 in the morning. We try to keep it pretty consistent to this time. It might, again, we've talked about it previously, fluctuate a little bit as the year goes by. But in generality, Sunday mornings, you're going to find us talking live. And that's
Absolutely.
on both the podcasting, the good podcasting platforms out there, also on the YouTube. And who knows what might come up in the future as well. So today's topic, flexibility. I thought about this,
Stretching.
And stretching. Now, you asked me about this in particular as a quick query of, hey, what should we talk about? First thing that came to mind was, I guess, stretching, flexibility. It came to mind because we do it so differently to each other, I guess I would say. There's reasons behind, I guess, your stretching. Mine, I mean, in comparison is a subset of hours in comparison to how many you do. And you also looked this up because I feel like we've talked about this before. And so we have. So if you are interested in this, I don't know if you can find the video of it because maybe we've hidden it or maybe it is searchable.
No, you'll have to go to the Mere Mortals Book Reviews YouTube channel, old episode playlist.
And then episode 49.
Episode 49.
Episode 49. But it's much easier to find on the audio platforms because it is searchable, much easier. But we did a conversation back in 2020 about flexibility and mobility.
Yeah, mid-2020. So it's been 4.5 years, which is even crazier.
Correct. Episode
4.5
49. And so deviating a little bit about the conversation on stretching, we'll get into stretching. I re-listened to that episode. I listened to it on 2X. And a couple of things called out to me.
Shit, me too.
One, the quality wasn't bad on the
it was
audio.
pretty good,
I went, man, that was pretty good quality. That was 4.5 years ago.
We're still bumping things, but I've just bumped the mic twice now. So
it was so that I was like, wow, the quality that we were putting out there was good. Two, we were doing this thing which was like our mere mortal moment at the very beginning. I'd forgotten we'd done that. So we used to do this thing with the mere mortal moment. Very beginning, we'd talk about something that happened in the week. It'd be like a little quotable thing.
I think because we went to twice a week, it got to the point where we're like, I'm not having anything to talk about. Well, we're really stretching for something.
To bring up. So there was that as well. But the third one was, we're going to probably talk about it more in a personal nature. I reckon stretching today. But when I reflected on that episode, I went, man, that episode had quite a lot of detail to it. And we separately talk about static stretching, dynamic stretching, difference between flexibility, mobility, definitions.
You could tell our style was very different then. We had a lot more research, for one.
Yep.
As in, we were still using personal anecdotes, but it was more centered around, this is what we researched this week.
Correct.
Up,
But there was this will come up a little bit later. There was a really interesting thing that we talked about in there, which was stretching around longevity. And it's wild to look back and listen to it because it was 4.5 years ago. And I started looking at it in the way of, oh, damn, that's now. What I'm talking about. What I was talking about then, I wasn't a dad. That wasn't even the horizon.
Yeah.
The thinking more around them was I'm stretching more for.
Well, we were 28 then.
Yeah, and it was more
27
pristine mobility and maybe around my training, and that's completely changed.
Yeah.
Kind of like how I talked about it then. I probably didn't anticipate it to be that soon, I guess, thereafter. So, look, my recommendation is check out episode 49 because go find it. Good. Go see the level of quality we were putting out 4.5 years ago. It pushes, I guess I would say there's certain levels that we've improved to today. It's not by magnitudes, it's percentages. It's percentages that we've improved. So I was like, that's cool. It's cool to see that we were maintaining some level of quality all the way back then. Maybe, we've always thought about this. We're building a collection of content that people can refer to. I feel like you could go and re-listen to that one and it'd be
that one
just as, I feel like if you remove the episode 49 out of it and it was just a piece of flexibility and mobility, I reckon people would still tune into that. I could see that happening. So anyways, that was my spiel I wanted to set at the beginning, right?
The one thing, so I took my notes for this episode before I listened to that as well. And I was looking and I'm going, you know what? There isn't that much overlap between these notes and the last one. And there was a couple of things that I said in there, which I'm also pretty happy with in terms of like prediction wise of.
Or where you'd be now?
No, not where I'd be now, but you asked me how long would it take to get the splits.
Correct.
Yep. And I said, for me, obviously, I didn't do it well. It took ages, and I said if you were really dedicated, probably a year. And I think that still holds true-ish because there was a guy at the gym whose New Year's resolution was to do this. I was chatting with one of the PTs there, or she a PT, or just one of the coaches or the people who leads the classes.
Okay.
And she's really encouraging him, and she was like, "Yeah, I reckon I could get him to
do the front split in a year."
Front splits in a year. And I was like, "Okay, all right, yeah, I think it's doable." Just
with a lot
more,
of effort.
Yeah. It's the effort part which I now question how many people have it in them to put in
To actually do it,
that much effort.
Doable in a year, but what does it mean? Okay, so let's talk about that as a point. Again, reflect back. We'll talk about some things obviously that were around 5 years ago, but I guess my question now is how much has stretching changed for you 5 years, 10 years ago? Because you've been doing it now for a while. What's now, if you're looking at it right now till in the next 5 years, is there anything that you're changing in terms of what you're doing in a daily practice moving forward that's been different to the past, or is it literally still the same?
It's pretty similar. I've gone through phases of I'll ratchet up, I'll go harder, I'll turn it into a full-on session. So I've got a session now at the gym which has replaced what would have been a calisthenic session, I guess, and a leg calisthenic session, for example, where I will just do front split, middle split, pancake training for 3 hours straight, basically. And so that's more training wise. Like that's actual. I'm using weights, for example, putting them on my knees in a tailor's pose or butterfly pose.
Do you have to psych yourself up for these workouts?
Yes, and this is the thing that I went in there the other day and I realized, oh man, I'm not looking forward to this. Like this is really painful. I don't want to be here. I don't want to do this. And why am I doing this? This is why I also question, have people got the motivation to do this? Because if your motivation is I just want to flex and be able to do the splits, I don't think that's enough to. You can get better for sure, but to get full splits, and even I now say I'm not perfect. I'm still a slight bit off, both middle splits and front splits. I don't think I've got it in me to push to that final level of getting completely flat because
how much more effort
I'm close enough. It hurts so much already. The amount of hours I need to spend on it, and it helps the handstands, yes, but I'm at the point where it's
diminishing returns. And how much you're spending.
I'm well past diminishing returns. I'm into the minuscule slurping up the last piece of rice in the bowl returns, trying to
chopstick.
Yeah.
So let's set up the foundationals for I guess for Karen. It's very much it hasn't changed.
Yeah. So what I do
much.
So what I do in the mornings, I'll usually still do an hour of just general mobility warm up, but I'm not pressing as hard as I can to get additional. This is more just maintenance and limbering the body up for the day. And it's more just to kind of prep me, and that's very static stretching. When I go to the gym, 20 minutes, 30 minutes of dynamic stuff, and especially wrist flexibility and things. And then it's just normal training, and that's it. I don't even do any post stretching, which I've never gotten into. I don't know. I've never found that beneficial.
No, so most people will know this. I guess current workouts are optimized for the handstand work. Yes, correct. You are doing other weightlifting stuff thrown in.
Right at the end, just for because it's actually helping me with the handstands now.
Yeah, but the stretching for you isn't to optimize that sort of lifting. I guess it's not. You're not doing lifting and stretching. No. Where I stand now is my stretching is not in the morning, not when I wake up, but I'm training in the morning. So when I get to the gym, I've been doing a using AI, asking it like, what's the best things to do X, Y, Z. Because there was a couple of, what was I trying to hit? I was like, I want to, in the shortest amount of time possible.
Do the max deadlift as early as possible in the morning.
No, it was like, in the shortest amount of time possible, I want to be like mobile and stretched out, and I want to hit things like the wrists, the rotator cuffs, hips, knees, all of these various things. But I want to compact it as much as possible. So, it might sound crazy. 5 minutes. I just want to spend 5 minutes in my warm-up, stretching, flexibility, mobility, and we're going to intermingle those words quite a lot here. All in the one go. So I get done at the beginning of a workout. I've been throwing in like hanging off of a bar as well, just to stretch out. But for me, it's not for the function of becoming stretchier or mobile in that sense. Not front splitting, not side splitting, not for the handstand. It's predominantly so I feel more limber for the movements that are coming up ahead.
Sure.
Easily, like now, so when I compare it to the previous episode when we talked about it, now, as opposed to when I was 28, when I go in for a leg day or squat day, right, I can very, very easily tell. Part of it is also because it's always early in the morning, but that very first squat or second squat feels heavy, feels hard. When I do my stretching protocol or movement just beforehand for whatever, 5 minutes, let's just say it improves my ability to get warm and into the movement by 20, 30%. So it's not like amazing, and that's why I'm not spending a ton of time on it. So then to give you an idea, my stretching, if you will, or getting myself into the movement, I do more when doing the movement. And so specifically for a squat day or a leg day, I'll do some stretching and mobility to, get it like at least moving so I'm not creaky, and then working my way up on squats. And for me, a 140 kilo squat at the beginning will feel so much heavier than when I start getting up to 190, 200 more, because there's more time to be warmed up. And then when I go back down, it just feels ridiculously easy. But my stretching isn't about the stretch itself or becoming more flexible in that nature. It's become more get me quicker into the mode of lifting heavier in the movements that I want to do. So that's one aspect of it. And I think the other one was also the just stretching for the good feeling of the muscle fiber stretching. And so again, way back when I would do this way heavier and way more targeted, directed action around, I've just done a set of chest flies or something like that. Cool. Then I'll hold a stretch position on my chest pecs to try and do like any extra little bit of muscle fiber tearing for that extra muscle volume. Whereas now it's nothing like that. It'll just be maybe at the tail end of a session or a particular movement. I might hold a stretch in a particular position more as a recovery aspect to just let it unwound and not feel super tight, as opposed to, I'm trying to maximize X amount of muscle tearing or something like that.
Yeah. So a couple of questions. Taking away any logistic stuff, taking away any feeling of energy, what would be the optimal time for you to go to a workout and that 140 kg feels the best? Like, so right at the start of the morning, I can't imagine it's the best sort of feeling. If you were to start a workout at 9 a.m., midday, 3 p.m., 8 p.m., would there be any time where you're like, oh, okay, this feels the best, just getting into it?
Yeah. I think
the body's warmed up in the day.
The best time, honestly, has been something like 4 p.m.
Okay.
4 p.m. And I think there's some things around that which is like, right in the morning, you're not warmed up, you haven't had enough time through the whatever X amount of time prior to load up with food and be at the readiness. And I've trained in all those different like time domains.
Sure.
Early morning, 11, mid-afternoon, evening, that sort of thing. And I found the easiest in the past, even with stretching, has been around that time. That like mid-afternoon, that's perfect.
Yep.
Absolutely right now, there's no way in all of
of course,
heaven and earth that I'd be able to do that training at that time. However, optimal, that would have to be it for me.
Yep. Also, when you're coming into the mornings now, are you going through a set routine of these are the stretches I do to hit every body part? And does that deviate at all depending on how you're feeling, or you just...
No, it doesn't deviate at all, which has been nice. That's been really nice. I think that's one aspect of stretching that I've found really, really helpful personally is that, especially with stretching, because if you were to call out, again, squatting, which for me, I love squatting, and I could tell you, I don't even have to work through a process. I kind of like know what my process is because I enjoy doing it, and it's some mixture of some good morning, some lightweight squatting, going up in weight, a certain reps that I like, scheme I love. Don't even have to note that down. But with stretching, it is very, very easy, at least for me personally, to go into a stretch session, very short for me, but to be like, fuck it, I'm just going to go straight into a squat. Like, I'm going to do this. Well, I'll just like hang from the bar and kind of not be thinking about it. So I have to be really targeted and really conscious of, okay, and specifically right now, it goes, you do like the cow kind of stretch. That's the kind of beginning. Then stretch up one of my hands up, sort of, I'm still like leaning down, pass one of my hands underneath, do the other stretch around, do one of the world's greatest stretch. So, you put your knee forward, kind of a 90-degree angle. The other leg goes backwards, kind of behind your body. You're rotating, facing down and rotating up. Then there's, if you can see the video, Karen sitting down with his knee kind of placed over the knee, over his leg placed over the knee. Yep. So doing that, laying on my back, stretching out the hips.
Figure 4.
Figure 4, there you go. That's an actual name for it. Yep. So stretching out the hips in that way.
Or reverse pigeon.
Reverse pigeon, Jesus. And then there's hanging off a barb. So just letting everything sort of loose. And usually in there, some sort of like holding a squat, low squat position, just for a minute or two sort of thing. Could be on my phone or something like that. Yep. That's been generally the go-to every single morning. And that's been, again, you hear that and it's could I be optimizing it more perfectly in some other ways? Probably. But I've found that's now been the right mixture of I can do it consistently and I won't deviate away from it. Yeah.
And
if it was too much, I won't do it.
Take?
About 5 minutes.
Okay, yeah. So he's going through that pretty rapidly, for sure.
Very rapidly. Like I'm going to say the holds are 30 seconds, 40 seconds. It's not long. Yeah.
But that's very similar to what I do. The only additional things I do is the classic gym thing with the stick, getting it, holding it above your head and going at behind. Yeah. Or maybe doing some like windmill type actions with those. A couple of stuff on the wall, like just using the wall to be able to put your arm on the wall, your forearm on the wall, and then kind of twist into it and get that chest muscle. Some stuff with the fingers, but that's more particularly just for wrists. But yeah, everything else you just said there is pretty similar to what I do. I do a little extra stuff on my back as well, just with the knees, doing circles and stuff.
Okay. I was going to say actually something interesting that I've been using, and I'll probably say that I've used I've used handstands in this way. Like I've applied them in this way. I use handstand on the wall as a form of stretching after I finish a workout. And so what I'll do is usually it's after a chest day or after I've done arms, I will go to a wall and I'll do handstands, but I'll do the handstands where I place my hands quite far away from the wall and I'm bending my legs over quite a bit. And it's a good feeling stretch. Like I like feeling the stretch from my back kind of bending. I'll go to a little bit more pressure on one side of the arm, go to pressure on the other side of the arm. And I don't know what it is. I think it's I feel the pressure on my forearms. It feels nice to kind of bend back the wrists. It helps me sort of bend my spine in nice ways in that upside down mode. I've been using it a lot more as stretching as opposed to just doing handstand for handstand sakes. Let's just say that. So I don't know if anyone else does that at all, but to me, like it's a weirdly enjoyable feeling to do that. And then I pretend that I'm doing handstand work, but in reality, it's just stretching.
Sure. Because we're in this section now, I'll give a couple of extra details that we missed on the last one. So in particular, there's two types of stretching mechanisms, techniques, if you want, which get talked about a lot, which I have found not useful and useful. So one is PNF, if you've heard of that before. Let me see if I wrote it down. Proprioceptive Neuromuscular Facilitation. Ooh. You heard that one before?
I've heard PNF, and I was like, cannot tell you for the life of me what it actually...
So basically, the theory behind that, or the way it works, is you'll get into a stretch for 5. So let's say you're trying to do middle splits or
pancakes,
something like that. You'll get into the stretch position, whatever, just like the lightest stretch or just an easy light position for yourself. Start spreading out, and then you'll contract. Do that for 5-10 seconds, something like that. I've been trialing this recently with 5 seconds. So go out for 5 seconds, and then you contract your muscles as hard as you can for 5 seconds, and then let it out again for 5. Contract as hard as you can. So it's kind of like the point is to release, sort of like in yoga. They're all about breathe into it, release, sink into the pose. You'll hear that all the time.
Sure.
So it's kind of like that, but you have these periods where you're contracting as hard as you can to how this actually works deep within the muscles or the brain, proprioceptive, neuromuscular. So obviously it's something to do with your central nervous system.
Well, I was going to give you the killer example, and like we won't get into the mechanics of it because we're not probably people talk about mechanics, but you can try this out. So if you stand up right now, more or less if you're at home and you're not in the car listening to us, but you maybe can't stand up.
Don't do that.
If you stand up right now and try to touch toes and try to do it stiff-legged, so you're stretching out your hamstrings, maybe you can, maybe you can't, but there's going to be a certain level of stretching. Similar, so if you you do that, stand back up, and then you tense your quads as hard as possible because it's the muscle on the opposite end that you want to try and tighten. Why? Because with the PNFs, it's the opposing muscle that you want to then get the release of the opposing muscle. So here, quadriceps into the hamstrings. So if you squeeze your quads as much as you can for whatever, 10, 15, 20 seconds, I can't remember exactly what it is. Yeah. And then you let it go. And then you do the hamstring stretch, you should feel that the hamstring's a little bit looser or it lets you go a little bit deeper because of that reaction, I guess.
Yep, there you go. So I think unintentionally did a lot of this when I was doing yoga. When I first started yoga, accidentally, because I would be in this like crazy amount of pain in a pigeon stretch, for example, and I would tense up for a bit, and then she'd remind me, okay, now sink into the pose, and so then I'd sink, and then I would go like just pull hard and then sink. So I think I accidentally did this. So I will say it works. Yeah. Caveat to this is I've been trying it out purposefully recently, where I will have a timer on my phone. I'm going to go for a minute. I'll do 5 seconds 5 seconds contracting, 5 seconds releasing. And this has been with the purpose to get my middle splits down as deep and wide as possible. Mm-hmm. And I've probably done this for about 6 weeks now. I haven't seen any benefit myself. Okay. And whether this is because I'm already at
like at a certain level, a
certain level, I think it's likely that. And what's holding me back from this last little bit is either just bone structure. My hips will not allow me to like move in that socket anymore. I don't think I'm hyper flexible.
Kind of reaching physical limitation status.
It's one of those ones where it's like, but I know I could work harder. There is another level I could go to. But at some point you got to say like, okay, I don't think I can. Well, I know I'm not going to work harder on this. Like I've already explained, just like I'm not going to go further. Or it's straight up muscle strength, and that I'm weak that I can't hold a middle splits with my feet flat on the ground. Or ankle flexibility is also, I can really feel it working on my ankles and like pushing in a very uncomfortable, I'm going to roll my ankles sort of way. And I have rolled my ankles multiple times playing soccer in the past. So I know I've got weak ankles. The weak ankle Chiron is what they used to call me. Whack. When it gets to that sort of level, it's like, okay, well, the PNF stretching is not doing much for me anymore.
Sure.
Where it could work for me is probably back bending, because that's probably the weakest and most inflexible I'm at. Like, I'm still pretty fucking flexible, but in terms of overall
comparison, yep.
And that has not particularly worked for me recently. One thing, an opposite to this, is ballistic stretching, which gets into the dynamic stretching section. And ballistic is where you'll hear a lot of coaches say it's too dangerous. I like to follow Emmett Lewis's advice. He's been on the podcast before. We didn't particularly talk about stretching, but he's got a lot
on
that if you check him out. And his kind of recommendation is it's a good thing to add in. The trainer that I mentioned as well, she was saying like if that guy's going to get the front splits, like he'll probably need to do ballistics. And ballistics is essentially like you're moving through the motion in a kind of forceful manner, kicking, if you will. So I'm like kicking as high as I can to try and get my front splits a bit better.
Right. Like to get past the point of just maybe like slowly stretching into it, just swinging it up there.
Correct. And I think in the last podcast, I recommended against this, or I perhaps didn't have encouraging words to say about it. I'm still on the fence because it's like I can see people doing real harm to themselves, and it can be dangerous. Like if you're going to pinch something, I think it's more likely you'll do it in a ballistic manner rather than a passive static manner. But yeah, it's just something to look out for, and I have found that to be very, very useful. So PNF, ballistic, what works better? I don't know. I might have done one, might have not done the other, and now I'm just
testing out the other ones. Well,
correct. Yeah.
And I think there's applicability to stretching, and again, just we would have talked about it in the previous one, but it comes up again in my mind now, is apply the stretching or apply that idea just like you apply any idea. Like, do you need it? What's the use for it? You know, all those sort of things. Because at least for me, now as I stand, and I guess this is the transition that I talked about in that previous podcast and I'm looking at it now. For me now, it's stretching that partners up with more longevity to doing the things that I want to do. It's how I still want to just be able to squat and squat deeply. I still want to be able to do certain movements from a fitness perspective, but a non-fitness perspective. Well, here's a clear example. My back has been kind of sore for the last couple of weeks.
Okay.
And part of it is probably just like my general training that happens. Part of it is, and I've noticed that how I've been picking up my daughter has been a little bit of an incorrect posture.
Ooh.
And I've been doing this all the time, right? Just lightweight for a while. It's starting to not become that.
Exactly.
And so, you know, the general tendency that you have, for me at least, is you just bend over at the hips and you just pick them up. I've started to notice though, oh damn, if I keep doing that, that's actually aggravating my back. She's weighing 13 kilos now. It's about that.
Okay, yeah.
And, you know, once or twice, that's fine. When you're doing it 20, 30, 40 times a day, I've started to notice that really add up. So what I've started to do now is when I do pick her up, I go into a full squat position and I'm basically picking her up, hands underneath.
Turn her horizontal.
Deadlift. So I've got to I've changed her hands to barbell grips. So I'm able to just clean and jerk her. So then I go full squat, arms under armpits, and then I can stand up kind of on a vertical position. If I didn't have the mobility to do those things already, that would be a real challenging thing. And again, I fast forward to 20, 30, 40 years from now, I want to be able to pick up general weight in varying positions, being able to get something overhead and hold it in certain degrees if it's at the top of a storage or something like that. There's been other static stretches that I've added as well that it's not part of my focus plan that I always do, but I'll sometimes throw it in there. I did it this morning because Sundays at the moment have become a run and also just kind of everything else that I don't do through the week. So for instance, one of the things that I've been trying to do is literally 8 kilo kettlebell. What I'll do is I'll just swing it overhead and I hold it by its like handle and just holding it overhead. A couple of things in there, the stability to make sure that you're holding it by the handle so it's not falling. It's overhead sort of positioning for strength for the shoulder. But it's a lot more just that stretch position that most people just don't get into. So my idea of stretching has started to shift more towards, what are the various ways that I'm going to see it being applied in everyday life in the next 10, 20, 30 years where I'm going to need to just make sure that that's still around and capable of it. But absolutely primarily, it's going to be the mobility of my hips, the mobility of my knees, which also means, stretching those two aspects of it as much as possible so that it doesn't become locked in place, doesn't become, I've heard this of older individuals who are in their 40s and 50s and say, oh man, if I want to go do a leg session, it takes me half an hour to just warm up so I can squat deeply,
I'm already there.
And I'm like, well, I was like, I'm there, if I was to like walk right now and go and do a squat, it's fine. It's with a little bit of weight. Okay, like it's starting to get iffy. If it's a really, really heavy weight, okay, I need to do something about it. But
Sure.
I want to be generally capable to a certain like realistic degree. So I think stretching's now become much more that.
Yeah. Let's touch more upon that after the
Okay.
Boostagram Lounge. Because there was a couple of topics which I was like, oh yeah, we'll do that then. So Boostagram Lounge is where we like to thank our supporters, people who've donated into to the show monetarily wise. We do the value for value method here, so there's never any ads, nor sponsorships, nor anything like that. But we do require some help from you at home. So this is a section where we call out everyone. I think the only one was me this week.
That's correct. Testing out the new splits.
Yeah, so I can confirm the new splits are in order. I
Beautiful.
can confirm they're working as well. And Juan and I both managed to pull out a decent-sized pocket from our Albi accounts from just the bits and bobs that have been going on in there over the last couple of years. So it's certainly, when we're taking out a fair chunk like that, it was like, oof. Ooh, there's a nice little,
big chunk, yeah.
Nice little bit of Bitcoin here. So very much appreciated to everyone who has done that. Sad puppy for this week. Sad puppy.
Sad puppy. But it hasn't been sad puppy all of these years, so it's been very nice.
Correct.
So obviously, looking back to the previous time that we did the stretching episode, I actually listened all the way to the very end around our call outs at the end, and it was very much just...
Jeez, what did we say? I don't know. I skipped that part.
It was comments, it was, follow along, it was share with a friend, but of course, at the time...
Yeah, Boostagram's went.
Podcasting 2.0 didn't exist. I didn't even exist in 2020.
It did, but they were just getting off the ground. That was probably right around when they were starting.
Okay, June, it was like June 2020 or something like that. I'm pretty sure.
It would have been really close to that period where they were first starting. And I came into it a little bit late. Like they were already half a year in, 40 episodes in or something like that.
So, but yeah, it was interesting to look back at that time when we were doing that one and we're like, oh yeah, it was very different.
Yeah,
4.5 years ago, man. It's a big change. It's a big change.
It is, which is a good lead into. Do you remember what you said? Why you stretch in that episode?
Can't recall exactly.
Okay, so we both asked each other like, why do you stretch? And both of our answers were related to performance. I think. Why do you stretch now? What would be the reason?
Yeah. Okay, it's a good time from what I was saying before. So it's very much not performance now. Yeah. It's all about functionality.
There's two words I'm looking for, which I'm going to say. I want to know if you'll say it.
Oh, okay. Well, mine's more about being functional. It's about being healthy. It's about being capable. That's probably more my thing.
The two I was going to say were avoiding injury was what I was going to say.
Yeah.
And what has changed for me since then? So I was last time it was very much like, I want to basically be at the peak or be improving or progressing. This is what stretching is for me. Now it's almost all, it's partly that in the sense that I want to avoid injuries because I am doing hard things. Like the one-arm handstands are really fucking hard and tough on the body. But it's more now that I just don't want to get injured. And what really changed for me was one day, wettish day like today, where there's plenty of water on the ground, there's plenty of mossy, slippery places just out and about in general. But it's not raining, so you're like, oh, okay, it can be fine. I'll just walk as normal, drive the car as normal. Skid a little bit today on the way here. Freaked me out a bit. As I was just going around this, where we used to live in Baringa Street, there was a drain pipe which had just a little leak in it. And so there was this one little patch of ground where it just got this constant drip. And so that constant drip made a little spot where I think it like kicked up the dirt. Maybe there was some moss there or something. Well, anyway, I was just walking in one day. I stepped on that a little bit and did the old mini splits. And for whatever reason, I was just in a very compromised position. And I remember it really giving me a jolt. It was like I just loaded on my spine. Whatever it was that happened, I went, thank fuck I'm flexible, because if I wasn't, that would have hurt.
Yeah, might have like torn a muscle or something like that.
Oh yeah, that would have been really, really bad. And that kind of enlightened me on like, oh, okay, this is I wasn't expecting this to be the payoff from all those years of stretching, but that just then was...
That's like a clear
huge.
example. Here's I'll give you a clear example of maybe ballistic training, ballistic stretching that we helped out yesterday. And again, I don't do ballistic stretching, but I would say that I've held some positions of stretching, especially around my chest and shoulders. I've done for many years now. It's not like I'm doing a lot, but there's enough there that's more than a very stiff joint. And here's going to come in practice. Yesterday, I was laying in a weird position. I was like, we've got some foam blocks upstairs. My middle of my back was on a foam block that's completely like nice and back, level into square. Mm-hmm. Then my back was kind of, the top of my back was leaning back on a block that was sloping downwards. So I was kind of bent one way. Yeah. And then on my feet, I was on a set of stairs that bent the other way. So I was like kind of like bent. And my daughter was jumping on my like chest. And we were like having a bit of a fun game. And she was just, she gets tickled now. So she actually loves the tickle. So she's jumping around. And then on one particular thing, she jumped, but she jumped way too far and basically fell on towards like my left right-hand side. And I caught her as she was falling, but it absolutely stretched out my left shoulder and my arm to a certain position. But it was either that or her like falling onto the ground. And I was able to catch her with my left hand. Unfortunately for my daughter, I couldn't catch her like fully to the point that I like protected her from the ground. I slowed her descent and then I just like, she like rolled on the ground. But at that particular point, on my left shoulder, had I not done any stretching, if I wasn't mobile, again, not hypermobile, just stretching enough, I would have like torn something might have gone wrong. Aspects of it is strength, aspects of it is stability. But honestly, it stretched to a particular point that is probably beyond the just common range. But I've experienced being loaded in these extra stages or movements. And so it was okay. I was able to just kind of like shake it off. Cool, fine, get back into it. And I think it's those real world practices. And I guess this, borrowing a term here, but it's like general GPT, I called it last time, like general preparedness training, general preparation training, or general life training. It's that aspect of, I'm not stretching to do that. Like I'm not actively thinking when I'm doing those cat stretches and, world's greatest stretch. I'm not thinking it in the conscious of, so when my daughter does this, when I do it. Fuck, no one thinks about it that way. But I know that in part, I'm trying to get the best amount of application of stretching for the moment for, the reduction of injuries, but more for those times when I know, life's going to throw something like that in the way. And look, if crazy scenario, if I don't know, you slipped like that on some water and you fell onto the splits and you were holding like 40 kilos of pizzas. Of books, right? And you fall, you're probably going to rupture something, right? There's as much as you want to be flexible or whatnot, you're probably going to injure something at that point. So I also equally go, well, I'm not going to train the stretch or my flexibility to a certain point because freak stuff like that might happen and okay, I'm going to get injured. Yeah. That's fine.
The amount of people who accidentally fall into a Van Damme split is pretty low. That's not,
weighted as well. Probably not going to happen that often. And I'm not going to train for that. But for the little things where I just require stretching, like absolutely, I'll continue to do that. And that's going to become, that much more long service of stretching. That's what it's become now. Yeah. Very much now. 4.5 years ago, it was still very much younger mere mortals. My mindset was very much on optimal performance, physical performance. That hasn't left me, but there's a reality to what that actually means, how often I can do that as well. Now, a lot more, talking to like my mate of mine yesterday, there's a bit of a focus more on running right now for me, which is crazy for me to think. 4.5 years ago, I'm certain I didn't talk anything about that. But now I recognize the level of stretching that I need on my quads or my hips. And it's just because of the change up in modalities that I'm doing, right? Just doing gym lifting is different types of stress and different types of rigidity that something like running would build. So, and I've never really experienced that. So there's more of, I'm not doing it enough. But I know I can foresee that in the year to come, okay, there's more stretches, let's say a couch stretch or things for my quadriceps that I need to make sure I'm doing if I'm going to continue running, then I need to do certain things to also make sure I'm avoiding those injuries that are pretty commonplace if I don't do anything about it.
For sure. Have you ever injured yourself while stretching?
Yeah, not ever majorly. A clear example is when we were at South Bank on the green and we were doing those pancake stretches and going on the ground and doing those squats on like the angle.
When were we doing that?
That was when we caught up with Brody and a few other people, if you remember that.
Recently?
Yes, it was a couple of weeks ago.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. On that particular day, we were doing pancake sitting and trying to touch, like, go as far forward as possible.
Sure, yeah.
Now, I did like 3 fine ones, and then one particular, I was like, okay, I'm going to really, really push really hard. And I went low, but it was that classic, like, okay, that was very hard push for how warmed up you were.
Yeah.
And I felt it in my adductor for probably a couple of weeks where I was like, that was like, that was a little bit of a push. So it was the balance just between, if you push it a little bit harder, that's going to be an injury now, but it was just at the warning level. Now, of course, one is still one, so I still heavy squatted like for weeks to come, and it was painful in my adductors. I had to be really careful that I was going heavy, but not enough that I was going to cause like serious damage. But that was the most recent one.
Yep. So that's one of the classic ways you do it, just pushing too hard.
Overexerting.
Yep. The one which I didn't follow my own advice in was in the last episode I mentioned about the weighted stretching. And 2 clear examples from this spring to mind since then. The very first time I met Brendan, who had been on the interviewed like 4 times on the podcast, really good friend. Saw him last night. One-arm handstand guru.
Guru now.
He's the guru. He's the leader.
Oh, damn.
Look, if you can get 13 seconds, you're a guru in my opinion. The very first time I met him, I thought he was a jackass because I saw him with a girl and he was demonstrating something to her, and he had either a 10 or 20 kilo plate on his back and was doing a pancake stretch. So what you're just mentioning, legs out in the ground in front of you, torso's trying to go in between them. And he went too far, pinged something, and this is before I even met him, and I was just like, what a jackass, like trying to impress a girl and hurts himself. And he was using too much weight, man. If it was 20 kilos, definitely too much weight.
Yeah.
I've got a full pancake. I can get abs basically to the ground if I warm it up a little bit extra. Cold, I can get down to chest easily. 20 kg is way too much even for me. And I can basically do the full, you're not getting much further than me.
Yeah.
And so that's definitely one where it's a real clear example. Even 10 kg, I'm really, really careful with when I do that. And it's iffy. I question whether it's worth doing with 10 kg.
I'm going to reveal something to the mere mortal at home. I've done the pancake stretch for 20 kilos before.
With you, I could say, okay, but you're probably strong enough in your back that you could just lift it up in a terrible position.
That's exactly what was happening. In fact, I remember videoing it one time because in your mind, you're like, oh, man, I'm going so low. This must be great form. I remember looking at the video and first of all, I was hunched.
Oh, yeah.
And 2, I was going like, you were saying chest to ground, man, I was probably like more than 2 fists away from the ground.
Yeah.
And viewing in the video, I was like, man, this is not helping at all. Like, I'm not doing anything with this extra weight. So, yes, be very careful loading it up like that.
Yep. And the way that I hurt myself through stretching, probably one of the only times, was a year or 2 ago. It was just before Brazil, so a year and a bit. I was doing a Jefferson curl, and I've heard this plenty of times before, don't use heavy weight with the Jefferson curls. And so Jefferson curl is essentially where you're, like Juan was describing before, you're reaching down for your toes, but you're standing on a box. So you can go further past your toes, which I can do because I'm very flexible now.
Yep. I can do it. It's because I'm very short.
And so when I was doing this, I got up on the box and I was like, I'm flexible. I'm strong in the hamstrings.
Time to load it up.
I'll use 20 kg. I'll use a 20 kg barbell. So went down, and to be fair, whilst doing it, I felt fine. Afterwards, is when I noticed like, oh, I've got this little twinge just right through my left hamstring, like right in the middle. And it didn't go away, man. It didn't go away the whole time I was in Brazil. It was still hanging around. I didn't do the rehab to make it better. So, that's why it lasted so long. And it's pretty good now. If something twinges, like it might be a little thing, but it'll go away really quickly. I didn't need to do that. That was silly. It was too much. And I learned very quickly after that, okay, I just cut out Jefferson curls for a while, and I'm certainly not going to do that again. So 20 kg loaded positions is danger zone. There's some learnings. Some learnings. Yeah, and look, 10 kg is probably the max that I would recommend for really any stretch. I can't think of a stretch where you really need more than 10 kg.
10 kg. Here's my I'll in where you're coming from, I agree. I'll spin this one around. I'll give some learnings from mine past that I don't do anymore, which is if you're training to get a bigger muscles, not functional muscle, but bigger muscles, the usage of the stretch position to any particular lift is really, really good. Why? Because you kind of get the extra benefit of stretching your muscle fibers for that extra tearing without the actual movement being performed per se. So what does that look like? You might do a set of bench press, 4 sets by 8. You might, for instance, you set it 4 by 8 at 100 kilos. You might, at the very either do an extra set or at the very end, you just hold the weight at a stretch position. And that stretch just helps out in stretching out the muscle fibers, maybe hopefully a couple more tears in there without you actually having to do the concentric phase, is actually squeezing it out, right? So that aspect of it can be good. Same thing you'll see out there with dumbbell flies, the suggestion is, get some dumbbells, maybe a little bit light up, but just go supremely wide. Now, 2 things for me now. 1, it's time intensive because you add that amount of stretching into your workouts. 2, I'm not optimizing anymore for that much more functionally as opposed to obtaining more muscle. But I would say in that, man, load it up heavy. Load it up as heavy as you can within safety reasons. But I would only say that has to be in those movements that you're doing. And I wouldn't be doing like that sort of static stretching with a deadlift position, let's just say.
Sure.
And that loaded position is probably not going to be as great. But in those maybe other positions where it's there is susceptibility for an injury, be real careful on loading that up in a very heavy way.
Yeah, I'm thinking more in the sense of you're not doing the exercise to build muscle or strengthen that position. So, for example, Taylor's pose, butterfly, you got the kettlebells on your knees. You can try and do some lifts. I've tried doing that. I found it didn't actually work well at getting stronger adductors. I can't remember which one. You're better off going to the pussy machine, aka I actually don't know what it's called. The one where you're just sitting down and you're spreading your legs like this with the pads on the side to lift the weights. You're better off doing that to actually build muscle. So I'm thinking more like really compromised positions where you're like, say you wanted to stretch out your shoulder joints or something. You do the classic like lift over with your shoulders, and if you had and basically I'm like bending forward and driving my shoulders behind myself over my own head. If you had a 20 kg weight there, like that's not going to end well. You're not working your muscles in any position there, and sure it'll drag you down. But
the probability of injury versus gains is diminishing as you start to go overhead there.
Absolutely.
Again, if you're listening to this and you're 16 years old, there's certain ways that stretching is going to be beneficial, and you're probably more optimized.
Look, if you're 16, you can basically do anything.
Yeah, that's what I mean. You can
and if you do get hurt, physical, you're going to recover pretty quickly. So.
But you can.
So you know what? Fuck it. Just hurt yourself.
But you can focus on the physical, on the performance. Whereas now, where we are today, at least for me, it's very much on the recovery, prevent the injury, to help me do the things that I'm already doing in day-to-day life.
Yeah. I just had written down here, who's stretching for? Honestly, I think it's for everyone. There's no one who I don't think can benefit from at least a little minimal amount. You could say, oh, but Kyron, I'm not hypermobile like you are. First of all, shut up. I'm not hypermobile. Not hyperflexible either. I'm not hyper anything. my joints don't work that way, or you know, all these sorts of things. I think everyone can benefit from a little bit, and I look at myself and my brother as examples. Myself, because I used to be very, very inflexible from 10 years of soccer. Now I'm at a really good level. I was actually thinking like I should probably take a video or some recording of me in front splits, middle splits, because I don't think I actually have any. And
really,
I'm probably at like pretty close to the peak now, and that would be worth.
Yeah, you got to document
something having. My brother has just started doing yoga, and so he's 27, so he's very much similar to me. Played soccer even longer than I did, even more inflexible than I was. I would argue, because I went with him to one of his first yoga sessions, and when he was trying to do the pancake, he could not get beyond the slightest little, just tiny bend in his back. He was so stiff in his hamstrings, hip flexors, lower back that he couldn't. There was no depth. There was no depth. If he had the 20 kg on him, it would just compress his spine. Like he's not going forward. Yet now he was telling me recently, like, oh man, every yoga session I go to now, I feel like I'm getting stronger and deeper. And it's like, yeah, you're still very much in the newbie phase where you're going to get crazy gains for probably the next year. And then after that is when it starts getting a bit tougher to really progress more. But, he'll be able to get 3/4 of the way to a splits just by doing, a couple of days a week of yoga. Is all he'd need to do. And he was just as, if not more, inflexible than I was. So I definitely feel it's for everyone and very, very useful for injury prevention. So, and it'll just make you feel good. Like being able to crack your back a little bit, like I did right at the start of the episode. And, it'll get cut out. But it's a nice feeling when you've got stiff shoulders, stiff something, and you can just give it a little, and it's like all those chiropractor videos. You've seen them where they're just like pulling people like, and that's probably not so great, but
if it's satisfying to watch, it's satisfying for the person. Last thing for me, something that happened. So recently, went to go play tennis with my partner, like just family, and the day after, I was really sore. Like my back was really, really sore. And I recognized, first of all, that just more so mobility, more so the spine in my core. I just hadn't done that twisting, rotation, and hitting for a while, and so it was just different. So I was going to be sore because of that different movement. However, it was not saving grace. It wasn't that painful or bad, but I did do a little bit of extra stretching for my lower back, for my upper back, for my core, for my spine to alleviate some of that feeling. And in some of the positions I was putting myself in, I guess if you had done nothing to hold some of those positions, I guess would suck, and then you wouldn't get the relief from some of those issues of mobility. And so I go, yeah, there's maybe underlying mobility that I could have for tennis, let's just say, but I'm not going to be building that up. And so the second best thing is have the ability to get into some of these stretching positions, both in the knowledge of what to do, but also in the being able to get into some of these positions to stretch out and hold it and know that, you can breathe into it, you can hold it for a certain amount of seconds and then maybe contract and then release again. All those various tools, just tools that if you do a little bit of stretching, it can go a long way. And in that other way, it's if you really don't do any stretching, you probably only need to put in 20% of the effort to get 80% of the value or towards what you need to do. And then you can decide if you want to spend the other 80% to go that extra little bit better, which, Karen's probably spent 79% to get, to the 97th percentile. And maybe it's the last few percent that it's like, okay, I'm not going to put in double the effort just to get past that. You've achieved what you need to do. So be aware of what you're trying to achieve. Right? That's going to be focal to how much you actually want to stretch.
I wonder if there's some dude out there who's just going like, oh man, so I've heard it's really nice to have that chiropractic stretch, like that sound. What if I purposely don't stretch for the rest of my life
to get the max
one
tension, huge release,
and then back in the old days, perhaps when he getting hung, drawn, and quartered, or hung, drawn, and quartered in particular is where they've got the ropes on each part of your arm and legs, and then they just get horses, I think, to pull you in 4 directions, and you just split off, and like that that minuscule second just before
death,
just
where
before
you find
death,
release.
where it's just like, enter Valhalla of the Garden of Eden.
That noise, that cracking noise will probably go around the earth like twice. It'd be like Krakatoa.
Krakatoa.
Krakatoa. Look it up, folks.
That actually wasn't Krakatoa. It was just
it was just
someone
someone who was 87 yeyears old and then never cracked his body, and then they just quartered him, and that was a crack.
Yeah.
That's probably why they call it Krakatoa, right? It was just a volcano. So if you take anything away, folks, from this session, it's if you want to have a really good one-time feeling, just prior to death when you're really old, don't stretch at all. Yeah. If you don't want to wait that long,
that's mere moral advice, right?
Yeah. So you can either do that or stretch for most of your life, and you'll get some release, but probably not as good as that final end of life stretch.
Oh lordy.
All right. Is there any comments?
I saw Lucas was in the chat. What up, Lucas? Also another good handstander. Pat was in the chat earlier, so thank you everyone who joined us live. Really do appreciate you coming in, and would love to know your thoughts on stretching. How much do you stretch? Is there any ways that you've hurt yourself stretching? All of these sorts of things would be very beneficial to know. Reach out to us via any of the social media platforms. Giving this a share. I'm going to go back to episode 49. Giving a share, a like, comment, letting a friend know about the Mere Mortals podcast would be very, very much appreciated. And,
correct.
Is how you can contribute some value back to us.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Mere Mortal lads, we're going to leave it there. Thank you very much wherever you are in the world. Juan out.
Karen out. Bye.
Good.